Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the Brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants.
Breaker 19, brothers. This is Rhit Moore, past master and current secretary of Fort Worth 148, coming from Masonic Mobile Command.
This is Billy Hamilton, senior steward for 148.
And this is Gabriel Jagush, calling in from his headquarters, Master Mason with Fort Worth 148. So, Rhit, tell us about the Mobile Masonic Command Center.
Well, I had to pay a visit to Plano Lodge, and it's quite a drive from Burleson. It's a little over an hour, so it was the only time I was able to get this in, and I couldn't pass it up. I'm recording on my way back home.
Right on. So, folks, please forgive us if there's any reduction in quality from our processing in post or just recording quality in general. You know, sometimes we got to be on the road. This week, we're doing another roundtable. As you know, we're going to kind of do that continuing in these holiday times. You know, all of us have a lot of Christmas time commitments, and, you know, so we're just going to try and keep it light. So we're going to just ask some questions, and then we're going to toss the ball around and see, like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that?
To talk about Plano Lodge, because, man, do yourself a favor if you're anywhere close. I drive, it's my fifth time going, and I drive over an hour every time, and it's worth it. They sent me home with a bunch of good ideas on technology and how to use it. Like they set up their degree teams. They have a app that you go sign up for what position you want to play.
Perfect.
So before they ever get to Lodge, they already have the degree team lined out. People that want to try new parts, that have learned it, can sign up. It's a really smooth process. I can't wait to get it built.
That's cool. I think you would probably get a lot of mileage out of the Google Forms doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to check with Sean Henry again exactly what it was. Genius sign up or something. But there's like an app or a web-based deal where you go in and set up, and he said it's really simple. But yeah, we've got to start using technology in our lodges. It's just, it's free, it's easy, keeps things running streamlined.
Absolutely.
It's always a pleasure to visit, but especially when you go and you get a nugget to take back to your own lodge to use.
Right.
And I would think there's also one of the biggest combinations is technology plus time. The most important piece of technology that I've encountered in organizational management so far in my life has been the RSVP. And if you send out invitations to an event, or summons to an event with an RSVP capability, and you have enough time for people to RSVP, then you're golden, because you're going to generally know what's going on.
Yeah. No, definitely, and you got a better idea of how to prepare for it.
So the first question I wanted to ask tonight, figured it'd be kind of a simple question for us to start rolling with, is this is by Spicy Chickpeas on Reddit. He posted it to the Freemasonry subreddit. He says, visiting another lodge for the first time tomorrow. Any pointers? Is there etiquette I should know about? I'm visiting a separate lodge to watch them do an EA degree, and I'm not entirely sure of anything I should do differently. I'm in the South, and we typically wear more casual clothing like jeans and khakis and a polo and button-down. Would it be more appropriate for me to show up as such while visiting a lodge, or should I wear nicer attire?
For me, unless you know the specific culture of that lodge, I show up. I can hear people screaming internal, not the external. But in line with what they're doing. But I visit lodges where I know it's blue jeans and, or khakis or whatever, and I will go a little more business casual. But like tonight, I know Plano dresses up, so I wore suit and tie.
Yeah. And, it's one of those things that it's just better to make the mistake of having dressed too formal rather than too informally. I've showed up to some places where, all we needed was like a blazer or whatever, and I know that sometimes you can get away with wearing a polo and a blazer, which is I don't prefer, but it was really hot, and everyone else wore button-ups underneath the blazer, and I was the only one wearing a polo, and I felt kind of out of place.
And you don't want to put yourself in that position. You want to be able to enjoy the environment, and if you're overdressed, you don't feel the same as you're underdressed.
Yeah,
right. Well, and so I've actually traveled to lodges in other states, and I know here in Texas we tend to be more casual, but I would rather be overdressed than underdressed, right? And sometimes I've gone to lodges in California and New York to where they are extremely formal. Like I show up in, a dark suit and a vest and a nice shirt and tie, but I still feel kind of underdressed compared to what the other brothers are wearing, right? Because, some lodges do go full tuxedo. So I say default, a dark suit and a tie should be your go-to attire when visiting another lodge that you're just not sure exactly what their attire usually is.
Yeah.
No, it always reminds me of a story that Pete Norman tells, where it was like 30 years ago, he made a decision in his mind that he was never going to go to lodge again without wearing a suit. And he stuck to that for decades. But over time, in the beginning of the culture of his lodge, by continually dressing up to where it eventually caught on. And that always reminds me, something simple as dressing up created change in his lodge. And it reminds me that if you want change, you got to be that change. And I say that because it just doesn't go with dress. It goes with anything. If you want better ritual work yourself. Don't expect anybody else to do it until you're doing it and consistently, and you'll see it catch on.
Yeah.
Very true.
Oh, and it's a good expression of how, we talk about internal, not the external and all that jazz. But honestly, a good suit, doesn't have to be the nicest, newest, most expensive suit, but, something that you take care of and care about. That's kind of a reflection of the way that you view something. It's respect, it's tradition. It's one of those things that, and I don't mean to needlessly parrot up ideas, but when I'm wearing a suit, I feel like anything that I do is much more serious. And I am a 26-year-old schmuck, and people call me sir when I wear a suit. And I go, what are you calling me sir for? I don't deserve that, and it's because I'm wearing a suit.
No, exactly. It reminds me of our degree attire. Nowhere did we ever regulate that you had to wear black suits. Started wearing them, and the last degree we just did, every one of us had on all black.
Mm-hmm. And
it's just happened organically. And man, it looks sharp too. We look good.
We do. To toot our own horn.
Yeah. And well, I think the whole suit, the black suit, I paid $80 for.
Yeah.
It's no Armani, but when the lights are dim, you can't tell the difference. And we all look the same. It looks really good.
Ah, so that's why we turn the lights down. Okay.
That's exactly right. You can't tell I'm wearing tweed.
Is it tweed?
No, I don't know what. I think it's cotton polyester. I don't know what it is.
Oh, gosh. I want to start a Tweed Lodge where everyone wears tweed jackets with the academic elbow patches. We all wear...
And a pipe is required.
Yeah, like everyone, like lodge rule, everyone must carry a pipe with them at all times. You get fined if you do not have a pipe on you. The lodge room allows for cigar and pipe smoking. Tweed jacket, with the academic patches. And like, I don't know what else. I feel like everyone carries like a clipboard or like a journal that they have to like log things in or something.
And when you speak, you must point with the pipe.
Oh yes, gesticulate with a pipe. All right. So this kind of question is it's something that I've run into a couple times in different formats. So I'm kind of condensing this into a general sort of question based off of all the different versions of it that I've heard. So, what do you guys think of the idea of a General Grand Lodge for the United States? So, like, most Grand Royal Arch chapters are part of the General Grand Royal Arch chapter of the United States. Most councils are part of the General Grand Cryptic Council. And anybody, most states, their Grand Commanders are members of the Grand Encampment. Texas is
kind of
not
like a Supreme Lodge?
Yeah, like a Supreme Lodge. Like Texas is not a member of General Grand for chapter or council, but we're a member of the general, right? The Grand Encampment for commandery. But no such arrangement exists in the United States for the Symbolic Lodge. What do you guys think about a General Grand Lodge?
Like, I see the merits behind it, but I could never get behind it. I'm not already think Grand Lodge has gotten too big. And the last thing I want to do is put somebody out there that governs what we do in individual lodges. But having a Supreme Grand Lodge might very well curb things like that are happening in other jurisdictions that are a little bit of an embarrassment to our whole fraternity, because the general public doesn't know. And let's just pick one, say Arkansas. They don't know that we don't have anything to do with that.
Yeah. Right.
And we get lumped into one big crowd. But at the same time, I think lodges have lost a lot of their autonomy, and it's caused us to suffer. I say that because in my opinion, I go visit and we talk about how to fix our whatever problem we're having. Everyone points to Grand Lodge and it's like, well, they're not doing this and they're not doing that. And it gives us someone to push the blame off on. And, Grand Lodge isn't going to fix our problems. It's just a handful of guys down there. It's going to be us that fix the problems. And we've kind of lost sight of that. We blame it on them for one way or another. Oh, the Grand Lodge law is so restrictive, or, they're not coming up with quality programs. You take your pick. But in the end, it's up to that lodge.
Yeah.
They've kind of lost that chutzpah to do those things.
Yeah, I think it's a great concept. But, I mean, I don't think it would actually happen, right? I mean, there's such a variance in ritual from state to state. You would have to iron all of that and have a single ritual for everyone. That would be a logistical nightmare in itself, right? I can only imagine the committees that would come together and try to figure out which one is the ritual that everyone would use. And then you have all these grand officers. I don't think they're going to want to give up their autonomy to be a subordinate body to a supreme group then.
Yeah.
That will be able to override all of their decisions.
Yeah. As for ritual, we going to be rectified Scottish right now, boys. I don't know. They have, they've got 3 symbolic degrees, so why not, right? But
somebody's going to have to support them financially, so that's another.
Oh, it'd be another assessment. Yeah. From that alone, you'd get, 90% of Grand Lodges saying no.
Oh, exactly. It would be a logistical nightmare.
One of my objections to a general grand body, and I like the idea of a general grand. I like the idea of a general grand lodge for a couple reasons, but I dislike it for more reasons. One of the reasons why I dislike the idea of a general grand lodge is that one of the ancient landmarks is that the Grand Master in Masonry reigns supreme, right? So for your Grand Lodge, he is the Grand Master, right? He's not he's not a representative of the Grand Master or whatever. He's the head cheese. And if you have a General Grand Lodge, then he no longer reigns supreme because he has to answer to probably not just the General Grand Master, but also all the General Grand Officers, right? Because I'm assuming the General Grand Officers would probably be higher up on the chain than a Grand Master.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things that not only would the politics be a nightmare, but in my interpretation of the landmarks, it actually doesn't work for us Masonic.
Oh, I was just going to say, imagine the cost, too, to be one of those General Grand Officers. I mean, we were just talking earlier tonight to a member of the Grand Commandery here on the cost that it takes to be a Grand member. Could you imagine having to be a General Grand Man in a General Grand Lodge?
Like, there's no way. You know, it would be... There is a stigma of becoming a Grand Officer. It's often seen as a rich man's game. And from talking to the Grand Officer that, you and I were talking to earlier tonight, it didn't seem like it was as exaggerated as it could be. Obviously for the Grand Lodge, it's definitely expensive. But for things like Grand Council, Grand Commandery, Grand Chapter, didn't seem as bad. But, for Grand Lodge, you're spending a lot of money to get elected, to travel, all that jazz. To get elected General Grand Master and to actually complete your functions as General Grand Master, I mean, you'd probably have to visit all 50 states.
Right.
And even if you were using a 3-year term, that's pretty common in the General Grand bodies. I mean, even within 3 years, 50 states is a lot to ask. So.
Oh, most definitely. And, I think about like when our Grand Lodge was formed, or any Grand Lodge, the original Grand Lodge, it was formed very loosely, but over time, our law book from 1860 for reading about 15 minutes. Our law book in 2017, it's going to take me about 2-3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so the progression over time, I mean, it would just get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I'm like, no, I can't get behind that.
Yeah, because I on the show before, we've talked about how we need to go through the Grand Lodge law book and just go at it with a Sharpie and start blacking things out to make things simpler and more streamlined, which may be a very brute force way of doing things and perhaps even short-sighted, but I'm a huge fan of simplification. Having a general grand body would bring some benefits. Well, if you see them as benefits, like standardization, more like, instead of handling recognition with 51 jurisdictions, you're just doing one jurisdiction. But it would be a mess logistically to put into place. And I think that's the only reason why, for states that are not Texas, the General Grand Chapter, General Grand Council, and and in Texas's case as well, the Grand Encampment work is that those General Grand bodies were started a long time ago, and obviously not very recently after the start of the bodies in those states, but long enough ago that it wouldn't. If you tried starting those same bodies now, it wouldn't work at all.
I just don't see how that would ever be beneficial. So not in enough ways to make it happen.
Not in enough ways to make it happen. That's a pretty good take on it. Yep. Outweighs, cons outweigh the pros.
Yeah.
So I have a question about a parade and bad jokes. I saw this one on Reddit, and I don't remember the poster's name. This is something I saved a little while ago. Something that I saw last night really bothered me. I would like some other insight. Brothers, this post isn't meant to single out any lodges or traduce any brother, but I saw something last night that rubbed me the wrong way, and my immediate reaction was disgust. I'm not looking for validation so much as I am to be told I need to lighten up and enjoy the season. I really don't know. Maybe just needing some outside perspective. To make a long story short, my city's Christmas parade was last night. Mine is one of the larger towns in the area, and as such, a few of the smaller towns in the surrounding companies participate in the procession and make floats. It's a really fun event that brings the community together and gets the kids out to have fun. The thing that really got to me was a single truck pulling a trailer that only consisted of two things: a man in jacket representing a large square and compass with his lodge's name, and a goat in a cage. I would like to say that that I would have felt better if the trailer was adorned with Christmas decorations, or if there were many other brothers on it, but it probably would have still been thrown for a loop. Am I wrong for thinking this was an extremely bad taste, or am I making a big deal out of nothing? My wife looked at me when she saw the square and compass in recognition, and she saw the look on my face, and she could even tell that I was in a state of disbelief at what I saw. The funny thing is, I had to explain the goat thing to her, and I said to an outsider they would be completely unaware. I saw that to an outsider they would be completely unaware of the goat reference. I need some light here. So guys, let's say somebody does the goat joke, like they have like maybe a painting of a goat or whatever, and they're out in a parade. What on earth do you do there? Like, is that something that's going to get to you? Is that something that you would want to talk to people about? Thoughts?
Well, I never really got from the beginning. Never really thought it was too funny. For me, it's a form of hazing, and I don't like that. But, at the same time, it was really popular at one point to do something that's just kind of dying off. So for me, I would have just kind of hung my head and shook my head and been like, oh, Lord, and then looked for the next float.
Yeah. And now when you say that was something popular for lodges to do, what exactly do you mean it was popular for them to do? Just make the goat jokes? Well, or are you saying they would involve...
The goat joke was, in former times, was a lot more popular and prevalent than it is today, because you see, there's not a lot of younger generations perpetuating the goat joke. It's something that I'm never... And I've researched it, the origin of it, and the best I could come up with is it came out of the Oddfellows. But I don't think that's the case. I just kind of popped in. But it makes light of a situation that is very serious and solemn. And that was another generation's forte. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's not the forte of the generation coming up.
Right. It's a reference that's about 100 years outdated.
Yes.
I think the problem I have with that, too, is who's going to look at that and say, oh, that makes me want to go down to the lodge and see what it's about, right? It's not only is it a misrepresentation, but it's an uninteresting, reference that nobody's going to get. Half the Masons today aren't even going to get it.
Yeah, it's like half the Masons nowadays or half the newer Masons aren't going to get it, and then the other half don't care for it, I've made a couple goat jokes, before, but they are all within the context of being with a couple of brothers, and we've all had the degrees, we know that there's nothing, there's no damn goats involved, Yeah. So it's fun to joke around with guys that have already been through the degrees and everything like that, because they've not got nothing to be worried about, right? But I can't remember. I was at an EA or a fellowcraft degree or something like that a couple months ago, and somebody was saying this is when they get the goat out, and I was just going, I'm gonna what? It was just very alarming to hear that joke being made to a candidate, and as somebody who was petitioning a lodge, somebody came up and told a goat joke to me. He was like, "Yeah, I had to go buy I had to go buy a goat, and they told me to go stand on this street corner with the dang goat, and I just stood over there for a couple hours, and it turns out I got the address wrong, and." But he said it so, deadpan that at the time I was going, I'm pretty sure he's joking, but I'm not sure that he's joking. And it was just the way that he conveyed it. And so when my investigative committee came by, one of the first questions out of my mouth was, there's no goats, is there? Or are there? There's no goats, are there? Because...
no.
It's just one of those things. We get tied up with this image of, Masonry already has enough trouble with us thinking that we're some weird organization, because we use terms like ritual and we have secrets and stuff like that. And then we have people making goat jokes. And maybe my mind is in the gutter here, but, when somebody makes references to goats in occult sort of stuff, I immediately think of sacrifice, or sexual contexts, right? Is there something horribly astray going on here? I don't want any of that associated with the lodge.
Especially when there is that misconception among some people that we are a cult. Yeah, that's in terrible taste.
Mm.
Yeah, Baphomet's head is a goat, so there's just, and if you boil it all down, why would you kid somebody, kid with them and say there's a goat? It's because you want to see their reaction and you want to get a chuckle out of it. So now you're making this about you. And then this guy's in his listening to the moral teachings. He's wondering, when's the goat going to come out?
Yeah.
Or he's listening for the goat noises,
Yeah.
And it just, that little small thing, it may not seem like much, but man, you're taken away from it. Because this guy, he paid for a degree, man, not goat jokes.
Well, and I can't imagine, and this is not disclosing anything secret, but, for those of you that don't know, after you receive the explanatory lecture in a degree, you are called to the east. That is where the Worshipful Master sits, so the president of the lodge, basically. And you stand up in front of him, and he usually recites or reads to you a charge, right? You've had the lecture that explains the degree and explains the moral teachings. Now you have the charge that charges you to carry out those moral teachings and be a good person in whatever way that the degree is meant to teach you. And can you imagine if somebody has been joking around about goats and you're facing the Worshipful Master and you're pretty much always making eye contact with him, and so you can't turn around? And you think maybe there's somebody sneaking up with a goat behind me or whatever, right? It's just, putting thoughts in people's heads. I don't,
Well,
yeah.
And there's a lot of people who don't know what we're about anyway. So looking at that, they may think we're some kind of FFA club.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's, I'm okay if they make that mistake, but because that's a lot more benign. But yeah, I don't know.
Bottom line is, it's about that guy, and you shouldn't be making jokes, or even as harmless of hazing as that is, it is a form of hazing, and we shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, and I would argue that, for anybody that doesn't know, Texas has some very strict hazing laws. I was a leader of a student organization in college, and we never got in trouble because we stayed above. We kept our hands clean. But we had to attend training seminars on hazing and everything like that, and it was made very clear to us in the seminar that Texas is very strict about hazing. So, don't go messing around with it. It's just a bad idea, even just from a legal perspective.
Yeah.
But before we move on, I want to mention that there is one goat joke I appreciate is that they had I went to one lodge that has a sign up in the foyer that says, warning, guarded by attack goat. That's just kind of funny. But anyway, so this short question. What all falls under the scope of Masonic education?
Oh, man. It's almost more like what doesn't fall under Masonic education.
Right.
I mean, because if you talk about the 7 liberal arts and sciences, that pretty much busted wide open.
Yeah.
So, anything that pertains to that, because I think we do get hung up on it being either history or strictly pertaining to the symbolism, and there's so much more to it than that.
Mm.
Like I met one of the new guys that's on the education committee, and he is has a degree in neural linguistics.
Oh, cool!
And I can't wait to have him come give a speech about that. And we're not gonna be talking about the square and compasses or this, still has something to do with Masonic education in my mind.
Mm. So one of the things that I'm working on right now is the High Priest and Thrice Illustrious Master Planning Guide. And in that guide, they said that one of the things that you should have at your stated meeting, and I thought this was interesting, was an educational talk as often as possible at each stated meeting, not necessarily related to Masonry, right? And the reason why I think they put that in there is not because they're trying to get you to give lectures on stuff that's wildly not Masonic in nature or anything like that, but because I think too many people kind of put this little box around what we're supposed to do education on, so that some of this stuff that we talk about it, whether it's the human psyche or if it's like history of Europe in the medieval ages, right? Which you might not really think of that as like a Masonic sort of subject. We kind of box ourselves in, and we don't realize like, hey, there's a lot of ways that this could actually apply to us, or that this applies to the craft or whatever. So I think the planning guide for high priests goes as far as to say, not related to Masonry, just to kind of encourage you to be open with your ideas.
I mean, really, we're also kind of a group that is very focused on self-improvement, right? Everything we do is supposed to help us, become better men, better fathers, better husbands. And really that covers such a wide range. I've heard of some lodges doing for educational content, stuff like screening yourself for cancer, right? Different checks you can do, how to manage diabetes. Even health topics like that could be considered Masonic education because it's self-improvement for yourself.
Yeah, we did the training on what to do if an active shooter is in the lodge.
I thought that was some of the most valuable training I've gotten in a while.
And that's what I'm saying. So you figure out what is relevant. Don't try to cram stuff down people's throat that, they're just completely not interested in. But at the same time, it does not have to directly relate to our craft. The majority of it should, but it's nothing doesn't hurt to mix it up.
Yeah. And then, you'd also probably be surprised by how much is related to the craft. If you go by the guidelines of the Fellowcraft degree, everything that you would learn in what we would call nowadays a classical or a Renaissance education, everything and anything that you would learn under that education is fair game. Because that's all the 7 liberal arts and sciences, in addition to a couple other things that aren't contained within the 7 liberal arts and sciences. But just education in general, for the sake of education, is, I think, fair game.
Yeah, the Fellowcraft degree busted wide open. Because, you got that. You got the orders of architecture, the 5 senses. It just busted wide open. So you can almost loosely tie anything to it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm reading Chuck Dunning's book right now, Brother Chuck Dunning's book, Contemplative Masonry. You know, a bunch of us picked up copies at the Scottish Rite reunion, and it's fascinating stuff. Like, he's talking about, you know, Masonry teaching us about the human mind, the human psyche, even the human body, and like the concepts like balance and you know, taking care of your mental health. All this sort of stuff that, like, you don't really look at the craft in those, in that light necessarily. But he's going, no, like, check it out. Like, let's think about this for a second. And he goes into detail about why it would apply that way. So it's it shouldn't have been surprising, but it was still kind of surprising with the directness of the connection that he made.
A lecture that I listened to years ago in Round Rock, where he talked about how he applied Masonry to his profession as a detective and interrogator. And he took his conviction rate or confession rate, and don't quote me, it was in the low 80s to like 96 or 97% when he applied the principles of Masonry to his interrogation techniques. Yeah, I'm telling you, that lecture was about a 3.5-hour lecture, and it 180 in my Masonic career. I was like, wait a second. You know, this gets much deeper than I had any idea.
Surprise.
Yeah.
All right, guys. As usual, it's been a pretty good discussion. This week's Fraternal Quote is, Masonic ideas are the precious jewels of speculative Masons. They should be kept bright and sparkling for all the brethren to see and admire. As such, they should be the special care of Masonic leaders, particularly those who teach and interpret the philosophy of Freemasonry. And that's by Most Worshipful Brother Conrad Hahn, past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Connecticut. So, gentlemen, closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts, huh?
Yeah.
You know, just when we have these roundtables, it just really reminds me about how, you know, you just got to dig into this craft and make it your own. You have so many people that will just proselytize about what this craft is and try to put that into your Masonic journey, and it very well may not fit. I don't care what title they have, what color their collar is. You know, you've got to remember to take that information and process it into your own Masonic journey, which may mean you may accept it or reject it. But as long as you're within the guidelines of the law, you know, make this journey your own. Go out and look for treasure.
How about you, Billy?
Well, I'd like to say, as we close this year, you know, of course, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah to everyone. I think this time of year, I like to reflect back on the year, and I encourage everyone to try and do the same thing, because not only should you look back at the year and see how it went, did you accomplish what you had set out to accomplish, but it helps you develop a mindset going into the subsequent year, right? You know, what are your plans? What would you like to do Masonically? You know, what would you like to do? I think this is a perfect time of year for reflection. So I invite everyone to do that. And, you know, I hope that this year has been what you hope for, or even better, and that next year gets even better beyond that.
Yeah, so these kind of thoughts are not necessarily related to what we've been talking about tonight, but just a little bit of what's been going on in my personal Masonic life is, brothers, you know, don't be afraid to ask more experienced members for advice and help. Right now, I'm finding a lot of little challenges, you know, and weird little ideas that I want to try, and things that I'm getting asked questions that I don't know the answers to, and there's problems that I don't know the solutions to, and right now, all I'm doing is asking questions. I'm going up to brothers and I'm saying, hey, do you know, what do I do here? What do I do there? And they can be, you know, the average Joe who's been, you know, a member of his lodge for, you know, forever, or the brand new guy, or a, you know, grand poobah of some kind. Just go up to them and ask. And also something that, and not to be contentious, but also don't be afraid to challenge existing opinions, even if they are a past grand poobah or whatever. Which is something which is something that I'm finding out right now. Not in a bad way, but just there are expectations that your reaction to your reaction to the status quo is something you should take note of and analyze and figure out why you feel that way, and then use that and decide if you're going to challenge the status quo. So, little personal lessons from my life right now.
No, that's a good point, but I think it's so important to, it's like George Patton said that if we're all thinking alike, somebody's not thinking. So we need to be challenging the status quo, and it may change things, it may not, but we need to constantly be testing ourselves for those weaknesses. And if it's tried and true, it'll continue to stand. If not, it's something we may need to change.
Absolutely.
That's a scary word.
Change.
Right. Well, and this is really your masonry, so you should be working to make it as good of an experience as possible. And it's no less your masonry than it is whatever grand you're talking to.
Yep. Absolutely. Because it could be you there one day. It's got to be one of us anyway. All right, boys. This is Rhit Moore signing off.
This is Billy Hamilton signing off.
And this is Gabriel Jagush signing off.